Okay, so here we are. Thank you for being here. It's late afternoon for some of you, and I know that you guys want to be outside with this beautiful party, so I really appreciate this audience. But without further ado, I would love to know how many of you knows about Crosschains? Okay, so we will have to be super educational. Okay, so first of all, I'm Ursula. I'm the Director of Communication at the Wealthfree Foundation. I work with the Polkadot project, I work with Parity, Substrate, Kusama, and many other projects, including the Parity teams. That I'm super lucky to be here this afternoon and to have my colleagues that they're the ones who are building stuff. I'm the one who just talk, but they're the one who builds. So without further ado, I would love to go first to Moobeam, Derek Yoo. He's the CEO of PureStake and the founder of Moobeam. And since you've been at the very beginning, I would love to know what's Polkadot for you.
Yeah, I think there's really two main ideas that are part of Polkadot for me, and I think that'll help provide context for the rest of the panel to go through those couple ideas. The first idea of Polkadot is to create a set of developer tools that help people build new blockchains. That's something called Substrate, and all of us here on the panel have used those tools to create our own blockchains. The second idea of Polkadot is to provide an environment, a very special environment for those blockchains to run in. And when blockchains run in that special environment, they get certain properties, they're very secure, and the really special part is that allows all of us here to interact with each other in a secure way. So there's this built-in interoperability. So I'd say those are the two main ideas from my point of view about Polkadot, especially related to interoperability.
So Polkadot is a technology protocol that builds blockchains, and these blockchains, they're based on the relay chains that all talk to each other, changing value and communication. And so we are under the same umbrella. This is umbrella which is Polkadot, and they're all building on Polkadot. But we have a general question here, and I'm very curious to know, why are you building on Polkadot? So we can start with Hoon, which is the CTO of Astar.
Hello everyone, thank you. So why are we building on Polkadot? The answer is quite simple, as Derek mentioned. The interoperability is something that's very powerful for blockchains. So we really want to use that to open the gateway for creating applications that is interoperable by nature. And in Polkadot, there is a concept called shared consensus. I'm not going to go into technical details, so don't worry.
Please don't.
So basically what you do is, traditionally when you're setting up a blockchain, you have to have a validator, right? So you have to find a way to incentivize those validators in order to make your network decentralized and secure and fast. But trying to find a way to incentivize those is always a problem. But if you're building on top of Polkadot as a parachain, you do not require any validators, and then you can still have decentralization with stability. So I think that's a pretty powerful stuff that we really like to, we're using a lot.
And Eliot Teissonniere, my French is really bad. I'm Spanish, by the way. And he's the CTO of Nodle. And you're working with IoT, you're building on Polkadot, and you're working with Crosschain. Why did you choose Polkadot to build all of your project?
Yeah, so to put it short, when we wanted to build Nodle, we very quickly identified that we wanted to build our own blockchain. If you're familiar with the concept, that's called a layer one, and we needed to build that network. We could not build Nodle on top of existing networks. But when you do that, typically, you isolate yourself. You are running a standalone chain, nobody builds on it unless you do the effort to attract developers. It's very hard. It's very hard to integrate with other applications. You are not composable. And Nodle Polkadot changed that for us in the sense that we can build our own chain, but still connect it to other blockchains, called parachains. But we're not gonna get into too many details. And yeah, Polkadot makes us composable by default with other blockchain apps on Polkadot.
Michael Seitz, which is like a website, he just said to me, it's a German last name, but he's American. And he's the director of marketing at Parallel. And Parallel, they're working with finance. And I would love to know also, why are you working on Polkadot for the finance?
Sure. Honestly, I would say everything that's been said here is very accurate to why Parallel is building Polkadot. Maybe a different approach or thought is actually us all here on this stage together and the interoperability between teams. Parity and Polkadot and all of the parachains work very closely. We're all in many Telegram threads together, working together. And it's an all ships will rise sort of network, which is fantastic and helps for my job in marketing to reach even more users, which is always our biggest focus as a blockchain.
So we all agree on the same, cross-chain, collaboration, interoperability, and one of the first parachain teams. Parachains are the blockchains built on Polkadot. It has been Moobeam, and so it's been 3 months since Moobeam has fully been integrated on Polkadot, which is, it sounds like pretty short time of period, but it sounds like ages for all of the work that we've been doing in the past. So what are the challenge that you're facing to build a truly decentralized world?
So a couple thoughts on that. One is that we inherit a lot of these properties that have been discussed just by being part of Polkadot network. So that's a great advantage versus trying to do all of these things on our own or by ourselves. Some of the things that we've worked on in the last few months include shipping some of the first features based on Polkadot's XCM technology. That's the technology that's used to power cross-chain integrations. And I would maybe stop for a moment and on that and say that you don't have to argue too much with people these days that it's a multi-chain future, right? That's almost accepted at this point. But the question, of course, is how those chains interact with each other. And there's a lot of different solutions these days. Bridges, different overlay networks, different interoperability solutions. But not all of them are created equal. And you kind of see this, right, in the news that there's news of hacks and other things happening. And so I think we're in a stage right now where there's been this big explosion of different interoperability solutions, but people are gradually becoming aware that they're not all the same. So they have different security properties. They have, there's different assumptions being made. And so my personal belief and one of the motivations for us to launch on Polkadot was that it uses this like very secure mechanism for enabling these interactions, what's called a light client-based approach. And so that's something that's creates a very solid foundation. And then we've used that to start shipping features. So for example, our XC20 feature is something that allows for tokens that are inside of the Polkadot network to move around, but when they come onto Moobeam, they look and feel and behave like an ERC20. So then people that are inside of our EVM can use them as if they're ERC20s, but they have this property of being able to move around to any of the other parachains that you see here, or any of the other chains that are in the network.
Fantastic. So you just mentioned it about XCM, which is a key word in this world. I would love to have the thought from Hoon, which is a CTO, and so he knows all about this. What's the difference between XCM and bridges?
All right, very great question. So XCM and bridges, first, I assume that everyone knows what bridges are, right? It's always in the news, it gets hacked every day, so much money.
Raise your hands. Oh my God, no, we have to go super basic.
Raise your hand if you know what bridges are. And raise your hand if you have $600 million in your bank account suddenly. I'm just joking. Right, so yeah, as I said, bridges, they're quite vulnerable. They're somewhat centralized depending on how you build the architecture, and considering how much money that's has been passed through, transacted between different blockchains. You would assume there should be basic auditing, there should be some very enterprise-grade security. But if you look at it, it's just like a bunch of nerds working on their basement, just 24 hours working on it. And that's a huge problem. If we want to make a multi-chain future, we really do step up our game. And one of the great things about XCM, which is short for cross-chain message, is that it's a feature that Polkadot allows parachains to use. And I'm not going to go into technical details, although I really want to. It's a native bridge. So by being a parachain on Polkadot, you're able to leverage this. You're able to open up a channel, and just by implementing the assets, the definition of an asset from a foreign chain to your local chain, you're able to just make that transaction happen. It's kind of like magic, and the implication here is really huge because it's not just about the decentralization or the security or the performance, but also you can actually make transactions and execute smart contract calls or your the blockchain's native features. Well, right now it's under heavy development, but that's like the future that Polkadot is seeing right now with XCM.
Good. It was simple, right? Well, I mean, to be more on the basic side, you have to understand that right now we have a lot of blockchains, and none of them they're connected. This problem could be problematic in the future, and it's the same thing that we could have a lot of internet and none of them connected. So what was the beauty of the internet? It was all connected. So, and that's how the internet has been growing for the last 20 years. So this is the aim for Polkadot, to create blockchains that are all connected. So that's why cross-chain is crucial for all of this. So, Eliot, what kind of cool things could be done with cross-chain?
Cool. And maybe to relate back to your explanation, Ursula, with XCM we can make blockchains connected, but what it means is that they compose together. And in the case of Nodle, we can just build so many things, right? Nodle is an IoT-specific network, which is very nerdy. We're not going to get into details. But what I'm trying to say is that we focus on building our application, our protocol, and our platform. And we don't have to focus on building, let's call that auxiliary services, auxiliary products. With XCM, we can actually rely, let's say, on Astar, Moobeam for smart contracts that interact with the IoT blockchain of Nodle. We can work with parallel on topics like bridging or bringing liquidity to our ecosystem. And we just don't have to do that ourselves, right? That is the magic of Polkadot. It may not be exactly plug and play on a technical point of view, but it's way better than anything else currently in the ecosystem, right? Where if you build an application today, in most cases it is very siloed. There is nice walls around it, and you have to find ways to go around those walls. Which is why we have bridges, which is why we are thinking of layer 2 protocols. And XCM is another way to implement that.
I'd actually like to jump in on that point. Go ahead.
Perfect. That was my next question. Please go ahead and jump.
Okay. I mean, for me, this question comes up of why does interoperability matter? And this is something that is not Polkadot specific. This is just for blockchains in general. And for me, the key unlock is exactly what we were just talking about, which is this idea of specialization. So when you aren't connected to anything else, you have to be kind of minimally good at everything to just provide basic services. And once you have these connections with other chains, then you can specialize on being really good at something. You know, do one thing and do it well. And then you kind of outsource or get the things that you choose not to be good at from other people that maybe are specializing in those things. So the mental model I use sometimes is something like an economy, right? In the early days of an economy, you might have had a local economy. You know, you had the local guy making shoes, making whatever it was. But then, you know, as things get more connected, maybe the country you specialize in making cars, but you get clothing from somewhere else, right? So people start to specialize and trade. And so that's the trend that I see as being the big unlock once there's good connectivity established between these different chains.
But that's a very good point, because I mean, we've been talking about the benefits of bridges and interoperability, but we have seen in the last year, I will say, a lot of hacking on bridges. So we would love to take your thought. Derek, you can start, and then you can jump. Please behave well, and you can jump on.
Sure. Like I said, there's a lot of solutions out there, but I do think there's some categorization that is starting to become clear. So, one category of interop solution uses this kind of multi-sig approach, as it's called. And that's, one setup where you have some trusted set of people in the middle that are watching one chain and then, relaying information to another chain. And I think that was more or less the state of the art for, some amount of time. But this again, like a lot of the problems we've seen lately have been around these multi-sig approaches for connecting chains together. So I do think that I'm starting to see new solutions. I think Polkadot's XCM is one. There's other ones like Cosmos' IPC, and there's a whole range of kind of newer interoperability networks coming out that are improvements on this multi-sig approach. And I do think that they're going to be, those kind of solutions are going to dominate because of this enhanced security. I mean, right now everyone's building bridges, but not everyone, has like the civil engineering, kind of the fundamentals, right? So some of these bridges are less good than others, and people are starting to understand that. And I think over time people will understand that certain routes, if you have a very valuable payload, it may make sense to take a longer route safer, versus maybe if you have an unvaluable payload, then it might make sense to take a quicker route. So people are getting kind of aware and more nuanced in understanding like what some of these paths look like.
Understanding everything always sounds a little bit weird. I hope that you understand it a little bit, because I know that is hard at the beginning. So we are going with Michael Seitz. He's a marketing director of Parallel. So as we can see, we have a lot of challenge on communicating all of this technical, all of this ecosystem, and a lot of new concepts as well. So what are the challenges that you're facing bringing this decentralized vision into the masses?
Sure. I mean, blockchain marketing in general, filled with many challenges, as many of you I'm sure can expect. I think the core challenge, for many different reasons, is education. The first place may not be as obvious, hiring talent, especially in marketing. There's a lot of fixation on engineering and filling roles in engineers. And there is a challenge there, but there's also just as much of a challenge in the marketing side. Finding a public relations specialist that can articulate interoperability to a mainstream journalist is a challenge. So I think that's the first and biggest. I encourage anyone here who knows anyone working in Web 2 that's tempted or not to look at Web 3 for opportunities. That's my biggest one. I think talent is just, we're all searching constantly. But the second, and really more towards the core of education, education is marketing for blockchain. There's no other way to reach users, especially outside of blockchain completely, but even basic crypto users, if they just hold some Bitcoin or something like that. DeFi itself is still very intimidating. The multi-chain approach is very intimidating. I actually think that someday the user may not even care or know what network they're using. They're just interacting with protocols directly. I think this is overcome with content, first and foremost. I think that's absolutely necessary for educational content across all facets, video, writing, whatever. But then also in the product design. At Parallel, one of our core focuses is an easy-to-use interface, clean design, which Kenny, our head of design, is just incredible at. And then also stripping away jargon as much as possible, sticking to the most simple and easy to understand messaging possible. If you will, putting paint and wallpaper on as much as possible to hide the pipes. So for me, that's really the biggest challenges right now. So.
For all of you, you don't have challenge?
Yeah, I guess I can jump in. So, of course, there's a lot of challenges because, as Michael mentioned, all the jargons and the complexity that's involved within the technology. It's really hard to jump in to what we're doing. But way how I guess I see it is technology is just an expression to me. We say Web3, blockchain, decentralization, but those are all just keywords that doesn't really mean anything if you don't consider the value that it actually offers to the end users. Because in the end, it's all about the humans, the people that use it. So what does blockchain allow? What does this technology allow in general? For me, it was always about having a platform where you can access the you can provide, make, build, and talk directly to the users and receive funding or some sort of incentivization directly from users. Kind of like how PayPal is doing it, where it's really easy to set up a merchant account, similar to how YouTube is doing it with, you're able to create your own video and just upload it, anyone can watch it. Just like that blockchain technology to me is essentially just a system that allows you to have that kind of accessibility, but in an economic level. So yeah, I guess back to your question of like, how are we going to bridge, like educate those Web2 people to join Web3, or how do we introduce ourselves? I guess for Astar network, we always call ourselves as like a decentralized app store on Polkadot, and a smart contract platform on Polkadot, because people can develop what they want to make, and if it's something that the end users like, then people can go directly to our network, stake on that smart contract, or we like to call it vote, support that smart contract. And just like Patreon is, the developers can receive rewards based on the amount of support that they receive. So it's more of a direct way of contributing to something without having any pesky legal work involved in it. So, yes, that's my answer. I hope I didn't lose you guys there.
Yeah, I'm sure that, you are doing very well. Because we talked before and he was going super technical. I said, no, we have to simplify this narrative. But Eliot, he's a CTO as well, so he's a coded developer. He's with his hands on the code. And he's been building for quite a while on blockchain, I believe. So how's your experience building on Web3 right now?
I would say it's improving, right? In 2017, when I was building on ETH, most of the documentation was 2 versions late. You'd have to go deep into the pipes and figure out what was going wrong by yourself, right? And to some extent, it's still the case. There are some changes in our industry, in building on that industry. But I think we've reached a point where, if you refer to crypto Twitter, there's a saying around, we need more great product builder at this point. We've cracked the engineering problem, right? It's no longer an engineering issue or an engineering challenge to build in Web3 or on a chain. Yes, new technologies, new frameworks, it's fine. What we need to do now is building great products, building amazing interfaces, building amazing and off-ramp systems for users. And in the case of Nodle, most of our business is around bringing Web2 businesses to a Web3-based platform, right? And so when you think of products, it's also about what abstractions do you put in place in order to onboard users that maybe businesses, maybe old businesses, conglomerates, corporations. How do you do that, right? The solution is very simple. You make these abstractions great, and you take them by the hand, you make them explore concepts, and you simplify the heck out of it.
Well, that's the key question, how to simplify. Derek, Moobeam has been growing a lot. It's a pretty well-known company, I would say. You've been growing not just in the US, in Latin America as well, because I have seen your Spanish-speaking team and included in Europe. So I'm sure that you have a lot of different projects that you're working with. But coming back to Crosschain, what are your plans on Crosschain Moobeam?
Yeah, I think we're very focused on developers, right, and supporting what developers want, right? Providing the right tools and infrastructure for them. And I think there is a big change that we're at the very early stages of right now, where historically when people were building applications, I would call it, there was a monochain mindset, right? So a developer would select one chain, would use the tools for that one chain, and deploy an application to the one chain. That's changing now, right? That's almost an impractical approach now, because you have many chains, many assets, many users, like on many different chains. So how do you address all those? Just picking one is increasingly non-viable. I mean, even the staunchest maxis, I think, realize that they need to go and figure out a multi-chain strategy. The old approach is kind of this, the mental model is, again, this monochain thing where, let's say you're a DeFi application, and so the strategy would be, okay, let's get assets from all these different places, bring them into some set of smart contracts and operate on them there. I think the change that I see happening though is that and so one idea would be, or let's make a deployment, a separate deployment onto each chain. So I have 10 deployments. I'm going to deploy, to Polkadot, to Avalanche, to Polygon, and so on. But I think there's some definite drawbacks of that approach. Either if you're trying to bring everything into one place, that's a lot of friction. If you're trying to maintain 10 copies, of your software, that's another challenge. And so what I see is people just taking a new native multi-chain approach is what I would say. And this is where they're using this like cross-chain interoperability to create one system that is spanning multiple chains. And so some of those examples are on Polkadot, some of them I see even using other kinds of interoperability solutions. I think that's going to be a big wave of change as people rethink their apps into these like native multi-chain forms. And we're working with several projects that are pursuing this kind of architecture now. I think it represents a big opportunity actually, because people that are going to adapt to this kind of change, I think are going to have a huge advantage over people that are still thinking about things in this more mono-chain or single-chain mindset.
Please don't be shy and chime in.
Can I?
Because maybe I told them before, don't go too technical. And maybe I did scare you a little bit. So just chime in, please.
Can I?
Yes.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Might be a bit more technical, but I'll try to make it understandable, right? So, when you are a developer or an engineer, you typically build a stack. You build a stack of tools to build a product. So if you're gonna build, let's say you're gonna build a Facebook type of tooling, very boring, very Web 2, very traditional, right? So you're gonna build a server. Your server is probably gonna be in, let's say, a language called Node.js. You're gonna need a database. It's gonna be another technology. You're gonna need the front end. It's gonna be yet another technology. You're gonna need testing. It's gonna be yet another tech. And all these techs, all these Legos are put together to build a stack, which is your technical stack, right? And to relate back to what you were saying, Derek, we are currently seeing dApps and blockchain projects trying to be monostack. They build on one platform. But it sounds like the ecosystem is now moving towards how can I put all these Legos together and build my own stack, right? Why am I sticking to only building on ETH or Avalanche or Solana if you're into that? No, like actually I can use each chain I have in that ecosystem and reap the most benefits I can from those, right? When I mean reap the most benefits, I'm not thinking of financial or user benefits, although sometimes it comes up. I'm more thinking of technical benefits. There's going to be chains that are very good at special things, especially as we move towards more specialization. And I guess it also relates back to our idea of composability, right? Moobeam, Astar, smart contracts. If I want to do a smart contract, maybe I can use those, maybe I can use Ethereum. If I want to have an IoT section of my app, well, welcome to Nodle. We'll welcome you. But yeah, I mean, I hope you see what I mean, right? Which your product is a bunch of Legos put together, and you don't have to stick to one big Lego. You can build many Legos together.
Can I chime in as well?
Of course.
Okay. I'll make it really simple and short. Also, this is kind of an answer to your previous question about what is producing museums, and alongside this, the application. So what I think I guess I'll answer the question of like, what's the implication for XCM for the future of Web3? Traditionally, when there's only one blockchain, it's just a one isolated blockchain. Every asset's just in there. All applications are just only in there without any specialization, right? Now we have bridges to really sort of alleviate that problem of maximizing just one blockchain. It's kind of like how we first opened a seaport, and traditional when we have now established like a trade route between two nations that could be looked as a bridge. But of course, the bridge is maintained by whatever country is in that area. So you always have to pay them a fee to use that trade route. Now, I would say like XCM, the implication here is that it's not just a trade route, but it's like a free trade agreement of blockchains, where we can really, it allows us to focus on one aspect and allow others to focus on something else, as like Derek mentioned. And this means that we can see applications that can safely rely on other blockchains' functionality and reap the benefit of both two blockchains. A blockchain like this, for example, a project could deploy on Moobeam, and then they can use our DApp staking mechanism to receive rewards for their work on Moobeam, and other way around as well with certain features, and of course with Nodle and Parallel as well, their feature can be used together with other blockchains. I think that's such a very beautiful future, in my opinion. Because I mean, we're like making literal countries here, if you think about it.
I'm stealing that analogy. It was great.
Oh, I have to pay me royalty.
Deal.
I guess I was open.
Yeah, this is a huge community. But going to, I'm a journalist, a former journalist. No, I would say that when you were a journalist, you will always be a journalist. And I always like to go back to facts, because in journalism, you need facts. And so we are speaking a lot of high-level conversation here. So I'm gonna go to you, Michael, because you are the marketing guy here. So how can we bring these cross chains into the DeFi world? DeFi, I think that cross-chain will be crucial for the next 1 billion people on DeFi. But I would love to know, how are you planning to build this journey?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, any organization trying to reach 1 billion people not cross-chain have a very big challenge ahead of them. You would have to bring in so many new users from outside of blockchain, let alone you'd be siloed within blockchain. And really that's the issue with not having a multi-chain approach, is we have all these siloed chains and so many users across all of them that we could unite and be a united front on and see an all ships will rise scenario for the whole ecosystem. And so I think that's really the biggest, like the most important part to that. As far as the state of this right now, like for Parallel, we've started to build products already on Ethereum, and we're still, in process on our Polkadot products. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to the users in those individual silos and connecting that all in one easy to use ecosystem. That's what users want. They don't care which network they're on. I mean, they may be core crypto users today, but if we're thinking about the average internet native or even pre-internet native, they don't, in Web 2, they don't stress over whether it's HTTP or HTTPS. They care about how their experience is and nothing else. And so that's how we should do it.
Yeah, I'll riff on that. Several people mentioned this user experience point, and I would say that before blockchain, I was working on a regular Web 2 cloud-oriented product, and it is pretty jarring when you come into Web 3, when you look at the difference in thinking about user experiences. So I definitely echo that as a challenge, but my solution is pretty simple. I think it's just under-invested. So I blow people's minds when I talk about the cloud products I used to work on, and I say there was maybe a 200-person product org of which a third of them were devoted to UX, right? So that could be designers, that was doing UX research, that was different kinds of front-end engineers. It was just a huge investment. And then there were senior leaders that were designed from the design standpoint that were at the table basically with equal weight as some of the back-end engineers say. And it's just not that way in most Web3 projects I've seen. It's very heavily weighted towards the cryptography and back-end engineering and these kinds of things. So I do think it is a matter of priorities and investment and letting those voices kind of have like a front seat at the table. Because I think when you have products that are really focused on UX, you might have a release that has no features and it's just improvements on the UX based on feedback or instrumentation that you put into your app. And so I just think that's the kind of Web 2 skills that need to come more into Web 3 and need to be invested in more and need to have a seat at the table.
Learn from Web 2. There's a complete absence of mobile first in blockchain for the most part. Almost everything that we build even today is mainly desktop focused. And I mean, Robinhood is still one of the leading stock trading apps. They don't have a desktop solution of any kind, and we need more mobile first. I mean, and Parallel's not leading in this at this point, but it's something we think about a lot. I completely agree.
I would tie it back to the concept of interoperability too, actually. And the point is this, that right now in the current state of the art for Web3, even if you have a multi-chain scenario, the end user is forced to know a lot about the back-end infrastructure powering the app, right? So even in some of the best Web3 apps that are multi-chain, you're still like selecting like what chain to connect to, or you drop down, so that level of awareness that you're forcing on the end user to understand it's the equivalent of picking your database or something like this, like you used to have to do back in the day. I'm dating myself a little bit. It hasn't been like that for a while, but it was when I was when I started my career. So over time, like you hide more of these technical details from the user, but the challenge is, in Web3, how do you do that while still letting people control their keys? And there's certain principles that you don't really want to violate. But I do think that Crosschain can actually help that too, where you can basically provide a number of specialized functions that are behind the scenes that maybe you front it like through like one blockchain, but behind the scenes, there's interactions with many specialized blockchains or services that are ultimately providing the service to the user. I mean, that's what a Web 2 app looks like, right? You have these many kind of tiers of or layers of abstraction, that are separating the user from all of these back-end infrastructural elements.
So we don't have much time left, and these people are building the true version of a decentralized internet, which is not that easy. I mean, from outside of this world and in this conference, you see a lot of people super happy, being super faithful about the future, which is true. It's all real, but it's super hard to build behind all of this. So I would love to take your final thoughts. We have 1 minute, or almost 2, on this cross-chain future, this decentralized future, I would say.
So I guess I'll start. As I said before, the whole interoperability between blockchains is definitely a way to go. And for us in Astar Network, it's always about, we want to incentivize innovation and creativity. Because in blockchain technology, the smart contract or DApp industry right now, it's quite stagnating if you ask me. Everyone's making the same swap, another DeFi, another GameFi, another whatever Fi you're gonna call it. It's just all money-making products. But let's see some like really crazy product where you're not really making any money out of it by using it. Like, can you imagine by using some service or product or utility, you actually get value that's not just quantitative. Imagine if you can actually watch Netflix without getting paid and have fun. That's play a game and enjoy yourself while you actually spend money on that game. I don't really want to talk too much about money, but I think blockchain technology has to go to that route if you want to go beyond Web3 and truly create a world that connects everyone.
Well, we have 13 seconds, so I'm going to be very quick. I think we are building great protocols, and now we need to put them together and build great products on top of them. We need to bring what we do, Web3, which is digital, to the real world.
I'm just thrilled with where the industry is now and where it's headed. Being a user for 9 years and a professional for 4, I'm blown away with where we are today, and multi-chain is definitely the future in my opinion. So.
We just need many of these things to service all the users in the world. So that's it. I mean, you can't have a single chain world.
And more talent.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. It's time for you to go and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.